All right, so our issue was, and I'll be more explicit, is that basically now we've got this copying code that shifts all the items over. It really isn't so bad, right? But now the issue is that eventually our underlying array just fills up, and we get a null pointer exception. Let's go ahead and run this, right? Right, we slowly add items to the underlying array, and then it gets full, and then it says, hey, you've got an array out of bounds exception, right? Because array index out of bounds exception, not our index out of bounds exception, but an array index to let us know it was specifically managing with an array. It's at line 37, and it says, hey, there is no index to the right over here, right? This was our shifting code. It says, hey, we're going to start at the last index where there's content, right? Size -1. If there are size number of items in there, the last item is located at size -1. While I is greater than or equal to the index that we are inserting at. So, in other words, if we're inserting at index 1 all these items, but in this order, going this way, then we're going to take that item and we're going to store it at the index to the right. Okay, and then how do we store the actual item? Well, we had already written that we stored that item at the index just by placing it there, and then we incremented the size. Okay, so we're missing the last thing, which is, what if we run out of space? Well, I've told you, I'm sure you've been told many times, you can't resize an array. That's not very useful to us right now, though, right? Because I've been kind of implying that basically that this array list resizes the array for you automatically for you. Well, it kind of does, but it cheats. Like so many other things in the class, you'll find out that we're just cheating with the way we build stuff. If you can't resize an array. The only way to do it is if you want a bigger array, is to make a new array that's bigger and copy all this stuff over. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we don't actually need to make a check here, because what we'll do is we'll put a check here. If the current size is equal to the capacity, right? So first we check to make sure our index is our index in the right bounds. Then the next check we do is if our size is equal to our capacity. Well, if there's 10 items here and we can only hold 10 items, then we're completely full. In which case we're going to call a method, this dot reallocate. Now, it's going to take no parameters, and we haven't written it yet, but we have to write it. But what this will do is that it will make more space. Okay, private, so let's go ahead. I'll write it myself, actually, rather than just relying on magic to write it. Private void reallocate. It's a private method because we don't want anybody to call this, right? It is going to add additional capacity to our list. Okay, so the way this is going to work is actually it's going to work exactly the way you think it's going to work. We're going to make a new array that's bigger. How big? General rule of thumb, I believe, is twice the size. Although you could go with 1.5. Okay? Definitely don't want to make it 1 bigger, and we'll go into detail why in a bit. Doubles or capacity. Don't do right. Don't increase your capacity from 10 to 11. It's a terrible idea. All right. So, but we're just going to double our capacity here. Okay. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to make a new data. Right. Currently we have the data. This is going to be our new data. Is equal to a new array of e's, right? And how big is it going to be? It's going to be twice as big as our other one. So capacity times 2. Okay, so twice as big as our current one. And then we have to do our cast here. So actually, instead of an array of e's, it's got to be an array of objects. And we cast it as e. Right? Remember this from the constructor? Okay. E new data is equal to E object, new object capacity times 2. Okay. Next thing we need to do is we've made this new data, we made this new array, we actually have to use it. So what we're going to do is we are going to, before we forget, say capacity is equal to twice the capacity, right? Because we just changed the capacity of the array, or we will have changed the capacity of the array. For int I is equal to 0, we're going to iterate through the old array. The data dot length. Let's see, I is less than the data dot length, I plus plus, and we're just simply going to say new data I is equal to the data I. Okay, we've copied it over into the copied it over everything from our data over to new data. Now we've got an array that's twice the size, so we're going to now use it. Say the data is equal to new data. Copied everything over, and then we double the capacity. So the reason you don't want to increase your capacity by 1 is that this is a bit of an operation here. We have to take every item in the array and copy it that's been added and copy it over, which isn't too bad if you only got 10 items, but it will double to 20, then 40, then 80, then 160, and so on and so forth. And eventually you're going to get into an array list that has millions of items in it, right? If you're holding millions of items, right? It'll have a capacity of millions of items, which means at some point you're going to have to copy over millions of items into a new array. Okay? Now, doubling it means that we're going to essentially doubling the array means that this reallocate operation won't have to happen like every time. It's going to, you know, you're going to be able to add more and more items between reallocates as you reallocate more, because it will double. But on the other hand, if you were just simply doing capacity plus 1 instead of times 2 in each of these, then basically every time we added an item, we'd be making a new array and copying all the items over, which is as wasteful as it sounds. So now, anyway, so let's go ahead and review what we did here. If we ran out of space, we created a new array that's twice as big, copy over all the items, and then make that the new array. And then we mark down that we've increased the capacity. So now, run that. And now look what happens, right? When we get to the end, we add our final 3, and then we have a bunch of new, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? We created 10 extra spaces, and now we have 9 more nulls as a result. So now it resizes properly. All right, so let's go ahead and review this add method before we're done with it, right? If the index is out of bounds, right? If it's less than the size, if it's a negative index, or if it's greater than the number of items that are in it, right? If we can't just slap it on, if it's bigger than just being able to slap it onto the end, we throw an exception. We tell them we can't do it. You could easily just return null, just return nothing there, or just hit return, right? Instead, but I like to give an error there. If our thing is filled up, we can reallocate. Then we make more room. Then for every item going from the end of the array to the point where we're trying to insert. So, well, I think from your perspective, it's from the end of the array to the point where we're trying to insert, right? We are going to take that item and we're going to copy it over to the right. Take that item, copy it over to the right. Take that item, copy it over to the right. Okay? If we're adding it to the end, by the way, then this just simply won't run, this loop. Then we insert that item into the appropriate spot that we've made space for. Okay, so that's the first add method. Well, what about the second one? Okay, do we have to do this all again? Well, no, because I'm lazy. Because this add item, this one, is, remember, this is the equivalent of just adding on to the last index of the array, right? It's adding on to index size. So we'll just do that. This.add size item, right? This will add it on to the last index of the array list. And then we'll probably just change this to return true, right? And let's go ahead and just show that this works. Right, instead of adding this one, I'm just going to add it directly to this last 3 directly to the end. And see, that totally worked. Okay, so that's it. That's the add method for it, for this.